Let me go ahead and give a brief introduction to Jeremy Peters. As I was telling him, I was delighted to read credentials from people who got their degrees in England, because I did my master's and my DPhil in England, and I still have warm feelings for that place. He is a member of the Royal of the
Royal Society of the Arts.
yes, Society for the Arts. I was looking for, and he has a MBA Cantab. He is an assistant professor of music, particularly business and entrepreneurship, in the Department of Music here at Wayne. He joined us in 2018, so he is relatively new and making his way up the academic and professional ladder. He is the co-founder of Quite Scientific Records, and he maintains an active teaching, performing, and researching practice. And as I was trying to say, is a fellow of the Royal Society of the Arts. Previously, he was the director of music publishing for Ghostly International, having built the division at that company. At Ghostly, he worked on projects for film, television, advertising, and video games with brands such as Nike and Microsoft and Hummer, Apple, Lincoln, Motorola, Ford, Adult Swim, major television networks, and Sony PlayStation. As well, he was the music supervisor for the Emmy Award-winning documentary film Medora. Jeremy previously held lecturing positions at the University of Michigan Law School, School of Music, Theater, and Dance, teaching coursework on copyright, problem solving, entrepreneurship, and the music industry. He has presented papers at numerous academic conferences on arts entrepreneurship, cultural management, and has been invited for music industry talks on copyright, music licensing, governmental relations, and a number of other topics. Jeremy graduated with an MBA concentrating in strategy, with courses in creative arts and media management from the University of Cambridge Judge Business School. He's a life member of Clare Hall College, where he was a recipient of the Culture, Arts, and Media, BOAC Research, Clare Hall, and Mellon bursaries to support studies of the intersection of culture and business practice. He holds an undergraduate degree with dual concentration in music and political science from the University of Michigan's College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. So I think he would consider himself a Wolverine. He is a voting member, and my daughter would be glad to hear this because she's in that industry. He's a voting member of the Records Academy, that is the Grammys, and co-leads the Culture and Arts Entrepreneurship Special Interest Group of the United States Association for Small Business and Entrepreneurship. He's a member of the Society of Arts Entrepreneurship Educators, Music and Entertainment Industry Indicators Association, Academy of Management, and the International Association for the Study of Popular Music. He has served as an advisor to the Detroit Song Conservancy and currently serves as president of the board of directors for Detroit's professional chorale ensemble, which is called Audivi. Previously, he held positions with the American Association of Independent Music, 826 Michigan, and the Ann Arbor Area Chamber of Commerce. So you're in the presence of a very busy young man at the sort of height of his intellectual and academic powers. And he has taken time from his absolutely busy schedule to talk to us today on the record store as seen, Joe's Records in Detroit's Black Bottom. So thank you, Jeremy, for offering to give this presentation. And I now have the pleasure of welcoming you to the virtual podium.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to speak about this amazing and important topic that I'm hoping to shine maybe a little bit of a new light on. I'm noticing that looking at the members of the virtual audience that one of the subjects of my talk, the daughter of Joe Von Battle, Marcia Music, is in attendance, and I just wanted to point that out. As I mentioned multiple times in my paper, her work is part and parcel of my work in trying to tell and keep alive the legacy of not only the broader Black Bottom area, but her dad's store, Joe's Records, and all the things that happened there.
Well, if I might interject.
Sure.
I appreciate that recognition. Certainly it's not because I was invited.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So where now stands roughly I-75 and the corner of Chrysler Drive and Mack Avenue once stood a record shop. This record shop was owned by a Black entrepreneur, Joe Von Battle, father to the luminary historian and poet Marcia Music. She has in many ways dedicated her life to keeping the stories of this vibrant time and place alive, speaking and storytelling widely about her father's legacy. The cast of musicians and luminaries who frequented the store and the vibrancy of the Black Bottom and Paradise Valley neighborhoods of pre-urban renewal and pre-rebellion Detroit. The stories of this area are many, and much work has been done to preserve, retell, and retain this history. As historical preservationists prefer to say, this is the work of place keeping in areas at risk of losing their connection to history, compared to the place-making activities that planning professionals attempt to amplify that which is unique and already exists. Though the location of Joe's Record Shop no longer exists as a building, this store's impact is understood in the later creation of the Motown Empire and the Detroit musics that follow on from there. But first, a bit of a history tour through the lens of a few maps. The first image we see is of Black Bottom era Hastings Street, looking northward from the Brewster Douglas development in 1959. The yellow arrow shows the approximate location of Joe's Records at 3530 Hastings Street. The next image shows the approximate location where the federal government, state government, and local leaders agreed that I-75 should be built. They built the highway through this neighborhood, with the red representing the highway itself, and the green areas representing other parts cleared to create the highway's right-of-way. What is now the Chrysler Service Drive on the west side of I-75 runs near where Hastings Street had once stood. In many ways, this street named Hastings was, before its destruction, the beating heart of Black Bottom, running from what is now a large parking lot south of Atwater Street, near the Renaissance Center, far northward toward where Joe's record shop was located. The next image, taken in the 1930s, is held in the Reuther Archive here at Wade State. The photo predates the start of Joe Von Battle's tenure as the owner of Joe Records, but the building that eventually housed the location features prominently in this photo. It may be helpful to note that north is at the bottom of this photo, which looks to the south, opposite from the previous two images. The yellow arrow, again, points to the approximate location of the storefront that Joe Von Battle would eventually work from as the employee of a grocery store owner to begin with. Riffing off of the work of Lawrence Technological University's Emily Coteau, who created a full map of Black Bottom's southern half from Gratiot to the Detroit River, I stitched together two sections of the Sanborn fire insurance maps in order to show the location of the store from above in a way that could easily correlate to what we might find in a modern day view on Google Maps. The yellow arrows continue to point to this store, and the box in the red Google Map screen capture here is the same area covered by the Sanborn fire insurance maps. None of these maps and photos tell a particular musical story on their own, to be sure. That storytelling ability changes, though, when you consider them as artifacts of a street that was considered one of two bustling musical centers in the city of Detroit. In that new light, the razing of Hastings Street and the resulting void in its aftermath is an act of anti-creation. So why then are these stories important to musical scholars? Sure, the causal nature of the historical record is of interest, and there is importance to the teleological nature of the record store being a place where music fans can purchase music. None of this is up for debate here, but there are perhaps a few more levels of depth we might consider this store within. First, the point of humanistic investigation, as roughly defined by the American Council of Learned Societies, is the exploration of how we, quote, appreciate and understand what distinguishes us as human beings, as well as what unites us, end quote, while asking questions about how we as humans, quote, explore, understand, and change, end quote, the world that surrounds us, be it built, social, linguistic, or cultural. In short, we look to epistemologically process and explore cultural creation, but perhaps we cannot necessarily divorce that knowledge from the end product or the use of the artwork which is being created, as that broader context gives us a wider range of understanding. Here, the epistemological investigation sits in parallel with a sort of teleological interpretation of what a musical place, like a record store, is and is meant to be, especially given the particular actions of its owner and the relationship of that store to what was going on in Detroit at the time it was operating. Secondly, the story of music creation is not just a story of those individuals who write music, but the stories of those who perform music, who engage with musical performance, and who create the structures that allow humans to engage with a musical culture. More simply put, the totality of what music can be defined as is much more broad than just the compositions created by composers. Music is at once an art form and practice of art making and the sharing of that artwork. This sharing happens tangibly via recordings and sheet music, ephemerally via performance and broadcast, and through the practice of what we might call telling about, via oral tradition, storytelling, academic scholarship, and archiving. Given this view, The study of music, therefore, can and perhaps should include the entirety of action surrounding its creation and existence, especially within the subject's particular cultural context. This type of argument for a broader understanding of music study as the actions of music makers is championed not only by cultural anthropologists and media studies scholars, but increasingly by music scholars themselves. This might be best stated by Christopher Small's broad idea of musicking, which necessarily encompasses not just the creators of music, but those audiences who are on the receiving end of performances and recordings as well. He suggests as well, and this paper supports, the extension of the musicking argument to include those who help creators create, the labels, the store owners, sheet music publishers, and such. In this shifting of music as a noun that describes a thing to a verb that describes an action or practice of a thing. If we accept this definition of musicking as the entirety that surrounds a point in the history of Detroit music making, we can then see the story of Mr. Von Battle and his record shop in the context of a healthy and vibrant musical community of jazz and blues musicians centered in and around the Paradise Valley and Black Bottom neighborhoods. Loosely, the area where Joe's shop was located and where he did business. Given our understanding of Small's concept of musicking, the destruction of one of Detroit's main streets of musical activity is then an act of anti-musicking in practice, if not in purposeful intent. As an aside, the choice to define Hastings Street as a main street of musical activity is on purpose, from my point of view. In an article I previously published in the journal Art of Eight, I've shown that the area surrounding Hastings Street and the nearby Paradise Valley were similar in nature to current day Austin, Texas's 6th Street Entertainment District in terms of music venue density. There's a lot of activity going on. Whether or not the urban revitalists intended to demusic these neighborhoods, their choice of location for the new highway and the raising of Hastings Street had the net effect of doing so. And Joe's shop is among these stories. More importantly, the telling of history, and specifically musical history, has long had a bent towards the stories of white European music making and musical cultures. The stories of musicers of color, like Mr. Von Battle, are the stories that need lifting up to counterbalance the historical weighting of white narratives in musical discourse. While non-white narratives are growing in number, the need for scholarship and research and retelling and the voices and creative output of Black, Indigenous, and persons of color artists and art supporters is urgent. New York University's Matthew Morrison issued a call to arms to this end in the Journal of the American Musicological Society in his 2019 article titled Race, Black Sound, and the Remaking of Musicological Discourse. He charges that we must consider the, quote, systemic and property conditions under which popular music is produced, end quote, and to consider the impacts of Black creators as we, quote, remedy their experiences through our scholarship and actions, end quote. Therefore, the actions of Joe Von Battle as a collector of music, a promoter of music, and as a host to a number of musicians active during the heyday of music making in Paradise Valley and Black Bottom, Detroit, make up a story of musicking worth telling as fully as possible. That full telling necessarily includes the contributions of others who have written on this subject and who have told this history, but simultaneously requires some small space to discuss the broad impacts that this store had on nurturing and holding together a music scene in this flourishing time of Detroit creativity. It must be emphatically stated that we would have not much to look at and to read about pertaining to the history of this store and its impact were it not for the work of his daughter Marcia to preserve the legacy of her dad and his store and to tell their stories. This project attempts to use This work is a starting place to help correct other narratives which surround the history of Detroit music. That full telling also requires grappling with the choices that others have made in writing about Mr. Battle and his legacy. Unfortunately, there are numerous references to ghettos in the description of Joe Von Battle, the neighborhood where his store was located, and his method of business dealing. Among the worst of these instances are characterizations of him as a, quote, ghetto entrepreneur in Charles Shaar Murray's book, Boogeyman, The Adventures of John Lee Hooker in the American 20th Century, which was published only a few short years ago in 2013. Murray's phrasing is loaded in many ways. It at once belittles Von Battle's activities to support the artists that flowed in and out of his store, while diminishing the importance his store played in the growth of a strong music scene. That Murray is a white English music critic is important in relation to Morrison's argument that we cannot always trust the stories of creators of color to be told without a certain sense of bias. What is furthermore troubling is that Murray's phraseology made its way out of that book and into other sources cataloging music history, including All Music Guide, who has since changed the wording they borrowed from Murray in their entry, and a similarly worded reference in Oxford's The Encyclopedia of Popular Music, which, as of this morning, unfortunately still states that Von Battle was a record store owner in the Detroit ghetto. Running opposite to this phraseology is an understanding of Von Battle as an entrepreneur who took advantage of good fortune and who built a musical empire as an early musical producer of color, who is creating records as a Black business owner and creating records of Black musicians for an audience who is interested in hearing Black music. It is in this context and this point of view which this project takes and uses as a construct. His actions of musical entrepreneurship mirror those that management scholars have termed entrepreneurial bricolage, building off of Baker and Nelson's 2005 definition. Joe's actions were those that combined resources for new purposes and which used resources which were at hand for, quote, creative reinvention, unquote, to quote a definition used in by 1980s management scholars Rice and Rogers. Von Battle, therefore, created forms of value through what surrounded him and sought to build a valuable whole out of disparate parts and sources which he combined. The story of Joe's record shop starts with a general store in Detroit's Black Bottom neighborhood. As his daughter has told the store was located across the street from the Brewster Project, where Joe had moved his family. Joe was offered a job at a general store in 1945, and the owner of that store eventually looked to get out of the business. Joe took up this opportunity, and after a while sold records there from his own collection of records. He was a music lover before happening into working at and running a general store that happened to sell some records. The selling of a few records eventually outgrew all of the other activity of the store, and before 1950 turned into an inventory of over 35,000 records in what was now officially known as Joe Records and was Joe's Records and was a full-on record shop. This record store was more than just a place to purchase records, though. The store was a bustling center of activity, drawing in musicians who perused the record store's collection and sometimes performed in the space. Von Battle saw this opportunity, according to Susan Whitall and Kevin John in their 2011 authorized biography of Little Willie John, titled Fever, Little Willie John, A Fast Life, Mysterious Death, and the Birth of Soul. He, quote, kept recording equipment in a back room that he would turn on when musicians stopped by to play, end quote. That practice of recording performances to a reel-to-reel, shown in the picture on the right, which his daughter Marcia has in her collection, which Joe kept in this store, but also took to local churches, was part of an act of musicking, which at once created a recorded legacy of the blues music and other musics going on at the time, was an active entrepreneurial bricolage, and was also helping to cement a blues scene built by artists and musicians of color in Black Bottom. Some of Joe's early releases as well include the earliest known recordings of Aretha Franklin, the daughter of the famed Reverend C.L. Franklin. Franklin and Joe cemented a partnership where Joe sold recordings of the minister's fiery services to help grow his ministry at the New Bethel Baptist Church in the city's Near East Side. What you will hear in the upcoming clip is a record released by Joe Von Battle on Joe Von Battle's JVB imprint, recorded with the same reel-to-reel that recorded blues artists in his shop. This record features Aretha Franklin singing during one of her father's services at New Bethel between the ages of 14 or 15. One of the first records released by Von Battle is the Hastings Street Opera by Detroit Count, otherwise known as Bob White, voicing a tour guide's picture of what life was like on the busy street. While seeming comical at first, the story of the street in Detroit Count's voice reveals the nature of musical life, where only 2 venues were owned by Black Detroiters. In this light, the work of Joe Von Battle to record and archive this half-sung, half-spoken word song was an archival act embedded in Battle's entrepreneurial activity. This is most emphatically shown in a video the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History produced in 1998, titled Hastings Street Opera Revisited, which features this early record and straightforwardly subtitles what is being discussed in the song. I'll play a short clip from that right now.
Hastings Street Opera. Boys all down Hastings Street. Here in Hastings, the corner bar. That's the only bar you can walk in and get yourself a bottle of beer. You turn your head and somebody else is trying to drink it up. Boy, that's a bad joint. Well down the line, down Hastings Street. Palmer. Harry, Kirby, Frederick, Golden Bell across the street. That's the only place you walk in, you have to shovel the sawdust off the floor before you can buy yourself a drink. Hastings Street Opera. Well down Hastings Street. Farnsworth and Hastings. Warfield Theater, sleeping hours till 6 o'clock. Yes, yes. Oh, anything can happen on Hastings Street. Fiddle and Hastings, the Silver Grill. That's the only place you can walk in to buy a drink. You have to make the bartender and the owner drunk before you can get a drink. Yes.
In honor of time, I'm not playing the entire thing. These are available. That one is available on YouTube. I can share the link for that as well. Some of Joe's recordings were licensed to other labels with broader distribution, including the famed Chess label in Chicago. Von Battle eventually set up his own label, a music publishing company, and 2 additional labels. Among other recordings that Von Battle either released himself, produced, or recorded, or a mixture of the 3, are records by John Lee Hooker, Kenny Burrell, as well as Memphis Slim, Little Sonny, and more. Among these releases are John Lee Hooker's I Need Some Money, a re-release of the earlier Motown recording I Need Money, released on the Battle imprint. During the store's heyday, Van Battle sold what would, as of a 2017 Crain's Detroit Business article, now be equivalent to around $2.5 million in revenue from the music trade. Von Battle's musical empire was much more than a record store with a reel-to-reel in the back and a few connections to nationally distribute a few records. At the height of Von Battle's musical entrepreneurship, he was involved in the musicking acts of selling recordings to the public, offering musicians a place to rehearse, recording performances, sometimes of those rehearsals unbeknownst to the artist, manufacturing and distributing recordings from and of this place to a wider public, and running a music publishing company, the JVB Music Publishing Company. The record store was, to many, a scene unto itself. Noted record collector Ken Flaherty Jr. comments that during his heyday, Joe Von Battle was regarded as the cornerstone of Detroit's Motown sound, end quote. And that, quote, Joe's record shop was not just a record shop, it was a community, end quote, unto itself. In their book, Before Motown, A History of Jazz in Detroit, 1920 to 1960, Lars Bjorn and Jim Gallert call Von Battle's operation a, quote, center of the blues scene in the 1950s, end quote. Indeed, in her writings, Von Battle's daughter recalls that individuals who eventually became luminaries in the Detroit music scene often frequented this store, among them the likes of Berry Gordy, Wilson Pickett, Jackie Wilson, and other musicians who were part of the Motown scene whose epicenter was on the east side of the Lodge Freeway. Indeed, it was not until the mid to late 1950s that Gordy started and built the Motown empire over on East Grand. In order to understand how a particular record shop on a street in Detroit could be known as a scene, we need to take a look at what it might mean to call something a scene. Scholarship on the subject emphasizes the multidimensional nature of things that are considered scenes. Silver and Clark, in their 2015 article, The Power of Scenes, speak about, quote, the character of a particular place, end quote, emphasizing that scenes live in the context and in relation to the whole that surrounds them. For us to accept that this record shop was a scene, we must then consider it in the context of the musical activity that was surrounding it, the dynamics of the location, and the actions the actors took, including Joe Von Battle, but also including those musicians who frequented the store and the sometimes same, sometimes different group who recorded for Von Battle. Silver and Clark go on to theorize that scenes have many-sided contributions to the broader culture that are emphasized by their, quote, both and, not either or, nature. These scenes are also combinational in the sense that they knit people together, people who may be located near one another in a geographical sense, but may be otherwise loosely defined. Von Battle's store knit together blues musicians and the musical actors of Hastings Street and Black Bottom, the gospel music and sermons of Reverend C.L. Franklin, and the store itself, as it was frequented by creators of Black culture who would eventually go on to create a business that one might argue was at least somewhat modeled on Von Battle's vertically integrated music business. In the same journal article, Will Straw openly wonders about some things a scene might be, being the title of his piece. Among them, collective in nature, a, quote, workplace and space of transformation, end quote, and a, quote, space of assembly. All of these might apply to the record shop which Joe Von Battle ran. At once in-gathering musicians, transforming their musicking to a format consumable by a wider public, and serving as a co-locating place for a number of musical activities for both for Battle and those musicians who frequented his store. As he, to quote Straw's definition of a space of assembly, did the work to, quote, gather together cultural phenomena and endow, end quote, that creativity, quote, with a coherence, end quote. As a space of assembly, a particularly vibrant example is the record cover of John Lee Hooker's album, The Legendary Modern Recordings, 1948 to 1954. In an entry beautifully told by Joe's daughter, Marcia Music, on her blog, this image was taken by the French photographer Jacques Dimitra, who was in town to shoot photos to accompany a book about the blues. Joe picked up the phone and told folks to come by, and what transpired from this combinational event was the image we see on the left slide, shot by Dimitra just outside of Von Battle's store. Of course, Von Battle was operating among a wider network of record labels recording musicians during this time, including Detroit's own Fortune Records. This activity within a broader collection of labels doing the work of musicking while documenting Detroit's contributions to the American blues scene only serves to strengthen the notion that Joe's record shop was a scene, operating within a scene, which itself was working within a scene. This multi-level notion of a scene is emphasized in Bennett and Peterson's 2004 edited collection, Music Scenes, Translocal, and Virtual, wherein scenes are defined and discussed in relation to geographic scale. This shop, which operated from 1945 to 1960 at its Hastings Street address, this shop, which operated from 1945 to 1960 at its Hastings Street address before the street and surrounding area were demolished for the Chrysler Freeway, was on the micro scale acting as a scene, following the definitions that you see on the slide. In that Joe's shop was a place to be, a place where creative work was happening and was multidimensional in its activity. In the music industry and in what people in Detroit and the music industry knew it to be. At once a record store, recording studio, rehearsal space, and music publishing company. The storefront and building was a container for this activity and a space in which musicians and music fans could enter to participate in this scene. At the same time, the shop operated within a wider network of music making, performance, and activity in both the city of Detroit as a whole, the Black music community, Hastings Street as a locus of action, and the Black Bottom and Paradise Valley neighborhoods. While operating as a scene, the store operates at the same time within a scene, or even a collection of scenes, as a localized network of musicking and cultural action happening at the mesoscale. On an even broader level of analysis, the record shop transacted within what Bennett and Peterson characterize as a, quote, translocal, end quote, or cross-spatial scene at the macro scale. At the macro level, Joe's Records shop and the activities of its owner, Joe, operate within the broader blues music scene in the United States, a collection of scenes in Detroit, Chicago, the Delta, and other places in the US. This multi-level view of how a single store might be called a scene and simultaneously acts within scenes helps us argue for the importance of understanding not just the actions of a single record store owner in Black Bottom, but the broader context and impact that his actions had on music making in Detroit and the United States. Most especially set against the backdrop of the destruction of a Black Main Street and center of culture in order to build an interstate highway. It is this recontextualization of Joe's Records as a scene directly interfacing with the anti-Black urban renewal projects taking place in and near Hastings Streets, which help argue for the position of Joe's Records and the action of Joe Von Battle as musicking activities in and of a particular place and time in the Black history of Detroit. Both Naomi Andre's calls for a, quote, engaged musicology and Morrison's argument for a place for Black sound in the telling and creation of musicological knowledge further cement why we can call this record store a scene. It is my hope to extend this research, uncovering further documents in the collections of Wayne State University, the Detroit Public Library, the Detroit Historical Society, and at the Library of Congress in person once this is more feasible after the COVID-19 pandemic has passed. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our presentation. We're going to move towards our Q&A portion. So if you just want to exit your screen, we can get a better view of everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, unmute your mic, or you can also post questions in the chat. So.
Jerry, could you stop sharing your screen? So, yeah, good, thanks.
Sorry about that.
Let me see if there are hands going up. Any questions, comments? I know there are lots of people who are very happy to
So we do have one hand up.
yes, yeah.
You just want to unmute your mic.
Yeah, thanks very much. So fascinating paper, Jeremy, really interesting topic. I enjoyed hearing about it. I'm wondering if you could give us a little of an epilogue. What happened to the scene that Joe's Records was the center of after it disappeared? Did it collapse? Did it transmute? Did it translate? Where did it go, if at all?
There's a fair amount of recorded history that came out of this shop, and that recorded history is still available to us in the shape of records, in the stories that I have hoped to highlight here that have been directly told by Joe's daughter Marcia and others. And this location on Hastings Street was the first of after the Chrysler Freeways was built, Joe moved his shop to 12th Street and was able to keep enacting this musicking going on for a period of time after that. But there isn't, well, on one hand, there are narratives written about this. They're not necessarily the easiest to find. When we think of the stories of musical entrepreneurship in the city of Detroit, it's unfortunate that Joe isn't often considered part of that. We think about Berry Gordy, we think about other individuals, and there's a space and a sort of elevation or sort of an amplification that I'm sort of hoping to bring here, to bring the sort of same level of understanding there, and trying to also talk about his work in the light of arts entrepreneurship as well.
All right, just unmute your mic and the next question, Mary.
Yeah, I have two things. One is when you're theorizing, this as a scene, as a space, kind of putting a theory behind some of the just normal vocabulary we might just use to describe it. I'm wondering if starting with the actual history, talking about what went on there, who was there, listing all those things, doing a local history, microhistory, isn't actually the first step, and doesn't the theory come after? I just wonder about that, rather than kind of laying out a framework and then filling it in with the story, maybe starting with the story first. You said that there, these things are kind of hard to find. I know that Marcia Music has done some, there's a documentary that was done 3 years ago it's 7 minutes long, 7 or 8 minutes long, that incorporates some of the pictures that you showed and all of this. Yes. And you are, I assume that or you have access to all of this stuff.
Yeah, in looking at and putting this together and trying to look at this. So I'm looking at this through multiple lenses, both the idea of scenes in terms of, popular culture study, and also in terms of entrepreneurship and management research. And perhaps some of that is where I fumbled the ball a little bit in trying to tell the theoretical construct first and then filling in the story, because that's the way a lot of that research works. The hope is that this research can be extended to publish an article in an entrepreneurship journal telling this story of entrepreneurial bricolage in action, this musical entrepreneurship, because those stories are not well told. They are underrepresented, and this is a clear example, at least to me, who studies entrepreneurship in the arts, of vertical integration and this really vibrant entrepreneurship, which runs counter to some of the unfortunate language that exists there. I don't know if I answered that question well, but
Yeah, I can see that. I still wonder if even for entrepreneurship, if like all the local history stuff the things that Marcia has done, and
yeah,
I'd love to, if you want, I can put a link to that little video if people are interested, because it's one of the best things that the kind of talk you can talk about it.
yeah, it's an amazing video.
If the first thing is it's to have the full story told, the gathering of all the local histories, the parts of it into some kind of whole before as part of telling that story of entrepreneurship. I would think that's a real important part,
Feel free to put that link in the chat. I think everyone who hasn't been aware of it, you can put it in there. Marcia, next.
Hello.
Yes.
Well, I think if I might respond to Mary's query, one of the problems is I believe that Jeffrey is well aware of all of those resources, which is indicated by the fact that he has taken a significant amount of his presentation, as well as the images from my very work. And even though I am at this moment very chagrined about that, and about the fact that I was not made aware of this presentation in any way, nor given the courtesy to speak to me regarding the photographs or the information in my website. I am the only person who has done significant writing about the importance of my father, about his work, and Jeffrey was correct when he characterized my efforts and my labors as a part of my life's work in bringing my father's story to the public domain. And so I think that there is much work to be done about continuing the work regarding my father. I would chasten anyone who in the beginning of his presentation talks about the problems with white academics and their approach to this work, and then proceeds to not acknowledge in some significant ways the work that has been done already. I also want to say hi to my old neighbor, Anthony, that just spoke a minute ago. It's my neighbor, my former neighbor in Lafayette Park. So at any rate, your presentation was interesting, although I obviously can say that most of it is contained on my website, which is marciamusic.wordpress.com. I thank you.
And thank you, Marcia. I don't mean to be overtaking or trying to rewrite any of the work that you're doing. I was hoping that I could sort of amplify the idea that your father's store was in and of itself a scene, and try to connect it to some of the research on scenes and scene making that's been written by folks who haven't connected it to the important stories that you're telling. I'm not trying to, I want to be cognizant of all the work that you've done. And I apologize if I've offended you in any way.
Marcia and Ryan have their hands up, so go ahead. I think Ryan.
Hi, yeah. I'm kind of ignorant on the whole store. I don't know anything about the store. I go to Wayne to be a history teacher, and I've always been obsessed with the civil rights, especially with Detroit. So I saw this and I thought I'd peep in. Marcia, it's an honor to meet you. I'd love to hear more from you too about more history about it. And I guess, are you leading any kind of efforts, anything to kind of restore your father's store? Me personally, I've been really interested in the Grandy. So this is what I thought was another landmark in Detroit, your dad's store, that was really interesting. So are you leading any kind of anything to try to bring back the history of it, like rebuild anywhere near where it was, anything like that?
Well, excuse me, I think I'm muted. No. At this time, the area where the store was located is completely obliterated.
Right.
As a practical matter. Although there are, of course, a number of very serious efforts and discussions taking place regarding the change in I-75,
Okay.
literally in the former Black Bottom area near Lafayette Park. So I have not spearheaded any efforts to actually rebuild the store, which is really not within my purview, but I will say the Detroit Historical Museum, in a very poignant effort, reconstituted a facade of my father's store as far as they could conceive of it for their Detroit 67 project. And it may still be available for viewing, but it is just a facade, you know. And at this point, there's no efforts to rebuild the store itself, you know, after all of these decades.
I'd love to get your opinion on something. I've honestly only been working on it for like a month, if that, and my ideas are going left, right. Like once I get everything down packed, I kind of have an idea I'd like to run by you if you're interested.
I am very accessible.
Awesome.
All right, so you can look anywhere and find me, Facebook, Instagram.
Awesome.
Anywhere.
You'll be hearing from me soon, I promise.
My website.
Thank you so much.
I think that Jeffrey has done a service as far as establishing an academic basis for the significance of my father and his work. That is very important work. I do not denigrate that, and I don't take from that.
Oh, and like I said, I'm ignorant to everything that's going on. Mr. Peters, thank you too as well. Like I said, I just jumped on here. I was really, really interested. So just from an outside perspective, thank you to all of you.
No, bless your heart, bless your heart. No, it's just a simple question. You know, Aretha, she said it best, RESPECT.
I think I saw Ryan's hand up.
I think Ryan just went. Adam had his hand up.
Yes, Adam, yes.
Adam, feel free to unmute your mic. All right, so if Adam doesn't have a question anymore, does anyone else have a question? Any information, link to any videos, resources? Thank you, Mary, for, all right. Great. Well, it is 1:30, and if we don't have any more questions, I think we're gonna have closing remarks from Dr. Edwards.
Well, yeah, I'm very reluctant to let it go because this is such a rich presentation and something that is so badly needed, information about the early history or the mid-century history of Detroit. So even as I speak, if there are questions that come to mind, feel free to ask them. So I'm going to use the moment to remind you that in the chat, the Humanities Center, you will find the Humanities Centers are called for Brumback speakers for the next academic year. We're beginning to recruit for next year. So that if you enjoy this presentation and you'd like to help the Humanities Center to continue a tradition that we've had now for 25 years. This is the 25th year of the Brown Bag program. So feel free to sign up or to pass on the call for papers to other people who might be interested. But right now, if you have an additional question, please ask it now. And if not, I thank Jeremy for his talk and for the contributors to the conversation, including Joe's daughter, who has shared with us important insights about her father's work and the status. And if the Humanities Center can do anything to help promote the restoration and the celebration of the name and notoriety of Joe, let me know. And as long as it doesn't cost much, because we're a very small unit financially, but we will do what we can to assist.
Well, sir, in inviting Jeremy, you have done something for the establishing of his information and reputation within academia. And I think that is important. And you surely can invite me as well.
Absolutely.
If you really want to know this story.
Do fill out that form and send it in. Because we have had, the center has had Brown Bag contributors from the Detroit community, from other universities and so on. Most of our speakers come from within the university because of the limitations we have of advertising. But this virtual forum gives us an opportunity to have people from other places contribute. So do fill out that form and send it in, and I'll be sure to have you scheduled for next year. That would be great, and I hope you're serious about it.
I'm absolutely serious. This is what I do.
Yes, thank you.
But I don't know what form you're speaking of.
Okay.
So our form is in the chat, but I can reach out to you personally and give you a form as well.
Please
no
do.
problem.
Thank
Of course.
you very much.
Yes.
Thank you for your facilitation as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I just want to thank our audience for coming. I want to thank our speaker. We are so happy to be able to give the platform to you to present your research. This is what we do at the Humanities Center. Again, as Dr. Edwards says, we do have applications open for next year. I think this talk has been very eye-opening and a learning experience, and it has been recorded and it will be uploaded to our website and our YouTube page towards the end of the week. Just give us a little time. But again, thank you so much, and to our speaker, as a small token of the Humanities Center's gratitude, we do have a couple gifts that we give all our speakers. It's a mask and a journal with our Humanities Center logo on it that we hope you wear with pride. Since COVID, we can't give this to you personally, but we will be reaching out to you towards the end of the semester to give all of our presenters these gifts in a safe way. Again, thank you so much. Thank you, Marcia, for gracing the stage and sharing with us some important information. And if we have any closing remarks from our speaker or Dr. Edwards or anyone in the audience, I'm going to stay on for a little bit just in case anyone wants to post anything in the chat or wanted to have a few minutes to check out those links that Mary was so gracious to put in the chat. Dr. Edwards, anyone else?
I've said my piece. Thank you all for coming, and I'll stick around a little bit too, just in case Kenny and I have anything to say. But otherwise, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you from me to everyone who was able to attend, and for the questions and comments and thoughts, and for the important work that Marcia has shared in telling the story of her father, among which I put in the chat, just to point out and raise up the link to her blog, which she mentioned, marciamusic.wordpress.com, which is a treasure trove of stories pertaining to this time and to Joe's Joe's career as a musicer, if you will, following on from Christopher Small's definition.
Right.
Thank you. So that concludes our presentation. Again, I'll be staying on just a little bit longer, just in case anyone wants to check out those links that we have in our chat. Everyone have a wonderful day and be safe.
Thank you.
Mhm.